The government isn't your friend. I'm in central Porry today, and by the main cathedral, and there's a war memorial, and it's basically commemorating the soldiers, the Finnish soldiers that died in the Winter War between 39 and 40, and then again between 41 and 44 when Finland decided to be co-belligerents with the Germans and seized back the territory that the Russians had stolen from them in the Winter War. So there's no better example of why the government isn't your friend than war itself. As I used to say to the students that I taught, that it's governments that start wars, and basically the way that I see it now, after the 2 years of the people's pandemic, when we can all, most of us now can see more clearly about just how badly screwed over we've all been. But wars are basically, the way I see them now, is that this is just satanic sacrifices, blood sacrifices. And you can see here, that the way that you're viewed by governments, well, you're just seen as chaff, aren't you? Just worthless, I just feel so sorry for these people here, that they gave their lives for their country, when the government of Finland today doesn't care about Finns at all. If you look at this gravestone here, you can barely read the name, and it's not even 100 years ago. So we've not had wars for a while. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with Ukraine. I'm looking at the front pages of the UK newspapers as I do. It's just the propaganda is off the scale. And I just, again, with these Satanists, you have to offer your consent. So if you look back even to World War I and World War II, even when there was conscription, it was still possible to avoid going to a fight and die for these bloodsuckers. So who knows what they're going to try with Ukraine? I just wonder whether, modern soy boy Brits or Finns here, how many of them would actually answer the call, even if there was conscription, to go and fight and die in some pointless war in the Ukraine? The other thing that I heard, just it's all in the open actually, is World War I. That was the most evil of all wars, over nothing, over a fight between a family feud with three cousins, Nikolai in Russia, Wilhelm in Germany, and George in England. Just ridiculous that people are prepared to, or they get conned. And what I hope is, because of the people's pandemic and all the other kind of nonsense that's gone on, I think people today are probably more likely to see through the BS and not be willing to lay down their lives for some sort of invented squabble between royal families or politicians. What's also become clearer is that World War II as well, Hitler was financed by Wall Street. Hitler also had prominent British supporters too. These famous photographs of the Queen Elizabeth II giving a Sieg Heil salute. So what we have to do is wise up and basically tell these bloodsuckers that we're not going to take part in their stupid wars anymore. And more recently we've had the people's pandemic, where people gave their consent to have the messenger Britney Spears, and I really hope I'm wrong on this, but I can see, I could easily imagine that leading to big reductions in population in the next 10-15 years. So when it comes to wars and nationalism, stoking up hatred of the other, the government is not your friend. They tax you to death, and then they blow your money on stupid satanic blood rituals, blood sacrifices, which are called wars. Yesterday Sanna Marin announced that she was going to spend 400 million euros on providing education and general support for Ukrainian refugees. For a small country like Finland, that's a lot of money. And as a former economics teacher, I can tell you all about opportunity cost. that money could have been spent on other things. And of course, we've seen this in Britain for the best part of 20-25 years, where for political reasons we've had big increases of population created entirely by migration, and ex-servicemen, that you see who fought in things like the Falklands War or Gulf War One. Those are the people that you'll see homeless. And for Finns watching this, you have no idea of the homelessness crisis that exists in Britain. And you won't see, it's a very controversial thing to say here, but all the people that are homeless are of a certain ethnicity. And that shows again, doesn't it, that, rather that the state accuses us of being racist, when in fact the biggest racists of the lot are the state. The state takes money from one group of people and redistributes it to another, and then they play these kind of social justice, which is just a modern name for envy. They play these divide and rule games that get us fighting between ourselves. As far as it, just for the record, for me, my stance on immigration has always been, I'd be in favour of completely open doors migration, but you would have to get rid of the entire welfare state in order to make that viable. So no more housing benefit, no more unemployment benefit, no more state pensions, no more nothing. If you want to have open doors migration, you need to eliminate welfare benefits, because if you don't, you're just going to have welfare arbitrage. People are going to move from countries where there are no welfare benefits to other countries where there are. And people like Sanna Marin, what she's really, really good at is trying to pretend that she's super kind and altruistic. It's easy to be kind if you're being kind with other people's money. And that's another reason why politicians are not your friends. For many years I bought into the Kool-Aid propaganda about the NHS and how fantastic it is. Of course now we know that the truth about the NHS staff like GPs have been making out like bandits on a pay per Britney Spears, and they've been Britney spearing people who they must know the side effects of these Britney Spears now. That they must have seen young people suffering from myocarditis and pericarditis, and yet these people, they don't care. The NHS exists for one purpose only, and that is to advance the interests of the employees of the NHS. The NHS is just there for its own sake. It provides people with massive salaries, pensions, often for selling their own patients down the river. Another classic example would be like NHS healthy eating advice. I've got to be careful here about what I say about that, because this is going to go onto YouTube. But there's various drugs that have been that the taxpayer spends an absolute fortune on, and what I would say is that where does that money come from? Of course, again, it comes out of your pocket. The government doesn't have any money of its own, it just steals it from you. So this expenditure on pharmaceuticals, is it benefiting you, or is it benefiting the big pharmaceutical companies? What I would say to you is that the government isn't on your side. Also, what I've known as well, it's hearing more and more stories of this, is that people being put onto end-of-life pathways in NHS hospitals. Some absolutely terrible stories about that. Again, I've come to the conclusion now that healthcare is way too important to be trusted with politicians and governments. At the very least, in the private sector, private hospitals have got a financial vested interest in trying to keep you alive. Dead patients don't make you any money. The other thing that I would do, the American system doesn't work, although quite a lot of it is private, and that's because of regulation. what I would do is just sweep away a lot of those regulations and let people choose what type of healthcare they want. And and I think that would work. So when it comes to health, the government is not your friend. These people are the same ones that think that the world's overpopulated, and they think that it's an aging population and it's a massive problem. So why would you trust those people to give you health advice? Education is something else that's way too important to be trusted for the government. At the moment, what's been happening with education is it's been pushing all the alphabet soup stuff, encouraging young children to seek medical interventions that are life-changing, that have got nothing to do with their health. That just all sorts of absolutely terrible things are going on in schools. Schools are teaching young people to be afraid of stress. They're teaching them that competition's a bad thing. They're teaching young people that private business is absolutely awful, and instead that they should trust the government about absolutely everything. And this is it's self-serving as far as the government is concerned. Same sorts of things happened under the communists in Russia and under the Nazis in Germany. The state takes hold of education, and they use education not to educate people, but to create compliant, conformist drones who won't question anything. And that's definitely happened in the UK. So what my hope is that people will wise up. They'll eventually realise what the people's pandemic was all about, and there'll be a massive collapse in confidence in and trust in governments, and people will relearn the importance of personal responsibility and private enterprise. Education could easily be provided for everybody via the private sector. In the same way, you can have different types of schools for different types of pockets, and it doesn't actually mean that one type of school is better than another based on how much the fees are. A good example of that would be some of the most expensive public schools in England are absolutely shocking, because they are pushing this woke agenda the hardest. So unless you want your kid to be turned into a useless social justice warrior that's got this massive chip on their shoulder and sense of entitlement, that's going to be economically useless, don't send your kids to expensive private schools. And it's not surprising either that there's been a massive surge in homeschooling. People are sussing this out, and if you haven't sussed it out yet, you need to. So in summary then, governments are a massive waste of money, a corrupt waste of money. When I lived in England, I was paying 40% income tax, another 10 or so on national insurance, so that's 50%. Plus, whenever I spent my money, I was paying 20% VAT on more or less everything. That was 70%. And then there would be excise duties on top. So, you're looking at an effective tax rate of about 75%. For every £1 you earn, helping other in voluntary mutually beneficial exchange in the private sector, the state was stealing 75p, and I only got 25p of my own money to spend. And that had massive impacts on good private businesses who I wanted to use. I had to use Guildford Council with my refuse collection. They were shocking. If I was given a free choice, I'd never have bought services from them. The state in general. I remember when I lived in England, I thought to myself one day, everything that I still enjoy is provided by a private provider. There is nothing that the state provides that is any use at all. And you could see this, during the people's pandemic, with the PPE and stuff like that, that basically all government and contracts being shoveled the way of mates and Madazlan Matt's pub landlord friend who's. What it basically shows is that government is little more than a money laundering operation. They steal from us, and they launder the money through public services, and then they distribute it to their mates by providing services that are not really services at all, like useless PPE, and kind of just just rubbish services basically that no one in their right mind would use if they have a choice. And that's basically that rant over. People need to wise up. The government is not going to look after you. The government is not your friend. The government believes that the world's overpopulated, and for sustainable development, we'd be better off with fewer people. Yeah, and you need to wise up. The implications of that are pretty clear, aren't they? Okay, so with that, God bless.